I saved the company millions with my logistics plan. My manager still said, "You just don't fit the culture anymore." I was replaced by someone with a TikTok following. At their first supply chain crisis, they called me in desperation. When I walked in with a binder, the room fell silent because I've been holding on to this story for a while, but I need to get it off my chest. Maybe someone out there will read it and learn something from the mess I went through. I worked at a logistics company in Fort Worth, Texas for 8 years. It wasn't a flashy job, and I wasn't the kind of person who got attention. I just kept my head down and worked. I ran the numbers, sorted out the supply chain messes, and kept the trucks moving and the warehouses from turning into a disaster. I knew the vendors by name, the drivers by their truck numbers, and I could spot a bad route with my eyes closed. About a year ago, the company was bleeding money. Delays, bad contracts, broken systems, you name it, they had it. Lisa, my manager, was panicking because the board was breathing down her neck. She had no real experience in logistics. She came from some marketing background, but she had her buzzwords and her big ideas about modernizing. I stayed late, skipped family dinners, and built a logistics plan that could save us. I renegotiated vendor contracts, rewrote warehouse staffing models, and even found a way to cut our trucking costs by 30%. I saved that company over $2 million in the first year alone. I didn't ask for praise, but they gave me a plaque and a $50 Olive Garden gift card like that was supposed to mean something. Then things got weird. Lisa started talking about how we needed a fresh image, and how the company had to appeal to a younger audience. She'd show up to meetings talking about digital engagement and authentic content. One day she called me into her office. "I really appreciate everything you've done here," she said, her voice fake sweet. "But you just don't fit the culture anymore. We're moving in a different direction." Just like that, I was out. They replaced me with Brandon, 22 years old, TikTok influencer, always making videos of himself doing goofy dances in the warehouse, putting filters on product boxes, and making funny logistics memes. The guy couldn't even explain the difference between LTL and FTL shipping, but Lisa thought his social media following was going to take the company to the next level. I was angry, but I left quietly. I figured they'd learn the hard way. 6 months later, I got a call from Lisa. It was after 7 p.m., and her voice was shaking. "Hi, we need help. Can you come in?" I could hear the stress in her voice, but I didn't say anything. I just let the silence hang there for a few seconds. Then I told her I'd be there in an hour. When I arrived, the place looked like a disaster zone. Piles of paperwork on the conference table. People rushing around, stressed out. Brandon was there too. He looked like he hadn't showered in days, eyes bloodshot, hair sticking up in every direction. Lisa barely looked at me. The board was there too, 5 of them, all looking grim. I walked in holding the same binder I'd left with when they fired me. My logistics plan. Fully updated. I had been keeping it up to date, just in case. The second I set the binder down on the table, the whole room went dead quiet. Brandon was flipping through spreadsheets, completely lost. They were deep in a supply chain crisis, inventory backed up, orders delayed for weeks, vendors canceling contracts, clients threatening to sue. They didn't have enough drivers. Warehouses were overstocked with the wrong items and completely empty of the things customers actually needed. Lisa looked at me like she was about to cry, but she didn't say a word. I just stood there, flipping open the binder. I didn't have to say much. They could all see what I had done, what they had thrown away. That's when I realized they weren't calling me because they respected me. They were calling me because they had no other option left. And I wasn't sure if I was going to help them. The silence in that room felt like a weight. You could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the nervous tapping of pens on the table, the muffled voices from outside the conference room where people were scrambling. Lisa sat at the head of the table, looking pale, her usual confidence completely gone. Brandon was slumped in his chair, shoulders hunched, staring at his laptop screen like it was in a foreign language. The board members, all in their 50s and 60s, the old money types who used to give me those tight-lipped nods of approval in passing, were staring at me now like I was the last bucket of water in a burning building. I stood there for a moment. I wanted to let the silence stretch. Let them all feel the weight of it. Finally, I spoke. So, what's the problem exactly? Lisa's voice was shaky. We're hemorrhaging cash. Orders are delayed. Customers are threatening to cancel contracts. Our main supplier in Kansas just walked away because we missed 3 payments. Our warehouse in Houston is overloaded with product we can't move, and the Dallas hub is practically empty. I glanced at Brandon. His cheeks were red, and he looked down at his hands. I flipped open my binder slowly. Every page was in there: schedules, contracts, routing guides, cost projections. The same plan I had built before they threw me out. Did you even try to implement this? I asked, tapping on one of the pages. Brandon mumbled something under his breath. Excuse me? I asked, staring at him. He looked up, voice cracking. I thought I could simplify it. Make it more, efficient. Lisa cut in, her voice too high. We thought Brandon's approach would be more in line with our culture. We didn't want to overwhelm the team with spreadsheets. Spreadsheets. That was the word they used to dismiss everything I had done. Like careful planning, proper forecasting, and detailed metrics were somehow outdated. I could feel my pulse rising. I kept my voice calm. So you threw out the plan that saved you over $2 million because you wanted a new culture? No one said anything. One of the board members, a guy named Mr. Carter, cleared his throat. Look, we made a mistake. Can you help us fix this? I stared at them. I could feel the anger burning in my chest. I had spent years cleaning up their messes, building something solid. They had thrown me out like garbage. And now they were begging. Lisa was fidgeting with her pen. We'd really appreciate your expertise, she said, barely looking at me. I turned to Brandon. Tell me, Brandon, when the Houston warehouse filled up with outdated stock, what did you do? He looked down, mumbling. I posted a TikTok about how hard it is to keep up with demand. It got like 50,000 views. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of bitter, tired laugh you let out when the stupidity is just too much. The room went even quieter. I sat down at the table, opened the binder to the page about warehouse distribution, and slid it toward Lisa. You want my help? I said, keeping my voice low. Then you do it my way. No TikTok posts, no culture slogans, no flashy BS. We fix this the old-fashioned way, with numbers, data, and work. You either commit, or you keep drowning. What's it going to be? Lisa hesitated. I could see her pride fighting with her desperation. Mr. Carter spoke first. We'll follow your lead. But we need results, fast. I leaned back, feeling the power shift. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Because while they wanted me to clean up their mess, they didn't want me back. Not really. They wanted a band-aid, not the whole damn surgery. And part of me was already planning my next move. So there I was, sitting across from Lisa and the board, flipping through my binder like it was nothing, while the room felt like a damn funeral. They had no choice but to let me take the lead. But from the start, it was clear they didn't want me there. Not really. Every time I explained a step, rerouting shipments from the overcrowded Houston hub, renegotiating contracts with key vendors, restructuring the staffing in the Dallas warehouse, Lisa would chime in with these little, passive-aggressive comments. Isn't there a way to simplify this? Maybe we could automate some of it? Brandon was working on a dashboard. I cut her off. A dashboard doesn't do a damn thing if the data feeding it is garbage. You let a kid who thinks supply chain is just hashtags and dances handle your entire operation. Now you're in a crisis because nobody's tracking actual product flow. You want results? Then get out of my way. Lisa's jaw tightened. I could tell she hated that I was back in the room, giving orders. Brandon sat there, red-faced, picking at the label on his water bottle. He hadn't said a word since I called him out. But the damage he'd done? It was deeper than I thought. He'd convinced Lisa to cancel our contract with one of the most reliable trucking companies we had because their logo looked outdated. Instead, he signed us up with a startup he found on TikTok, run by a guy who sold disruption and AI-powered freight. Turned out that startup didn't even own trucks. They were brokering loads they couldn't cover, leaving shipments stranded across the Midwest. And it got worse. The Houston warehouse was packed full of items we didn't need, holiday merchandise ordered 6 months too early because Brandon thought early buys would make us look proactive. Meanwhile, Dallas had empty shelves, customers waiting on back-ordered essentials, and penalties piling up. Every time I asked a question, Brandon just stared at the table. Lisa tried to cover for him, saying things like, "He's new, we're all learning." But I could see the panic behind her eyes. I started working 12-hour days, trying to fix the mess. I pulled in the old vendors, begged them to come back. Some did, but not without jacking up prices. Others told me to go to hell. I walked through the warehouses, watching the workers scramble. They remembered me. Some nodded, some whispered, "Good to see you back." A few looked like they wanted to say more but didn't dare. At one point, I overheard a couple of warehouse guys talking by the loading dock. "Man, I don't know what Lisa was thinking, bringing in that TikTok kid. We're drowning out here." I kept my head down, but I took a deep breath. I knew I could fix the logistics mess, but the bigger problem was the culture Lisa had created. She was still pushing her fresh ideas, still trying to save face. She'd slip into meetings and try to shift blame, say it was the economy, or the vendors, or unforeseen challenges. No. This wasn't unforeseen. This was incompetence. And I could tell, she was watching me closely. She didn't want me to succeed. She wanted me to clean up just enough to keep the board off her back, then she'd cut me loose again. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't going to let her use me like that. So I started keeping notes. Emails. Call logs. Vendor quotes. Every time Lisa pushed back on a fix, every time she tried to override me, every time she suggested we go with Brandon's idea for better optics, I documented it. Because I knew this wasn't over. And when it all came crashing down, I wasn't going to just walk away this time. I was going to make damn sure Lisa and Brandon paid for what they did. All of it. I wish I could say things settled down once I stepped in. They didn't. Sure, I got to work right away. Rerouting shipments, renegotiating contracts, pulling in my old contacts, but Lisa kept getting in the way. Every time I tried to push something forward, she'd throw in a comment that slowed it down. "Let's not rush the vendor conversations. Brandon's been exploring some influencer collaborations that could open new markets," she'd say. Or, "We don't want to hurt the team's morale with too much change at once." Meanwhile, we were bleeding cash. And the tension in the warehouse? It was boiling. One afternoon, I was down in the Houston warehouse, trying to sort through the mess Brandon had created with his early holiday buy. Disaster. I was standing with one of the supervisors, Rudy, a guy who'd been there longer than me, when Brandon showed up. He strolled in like he owned the place, phone in hand, recording a TikTok. "Yo, what's up guys, just checking on the holiday prep." I cut him off, loud enough for the entire floor to hear. "Put the phone down. This isn't a damn studio, it's a warehouse. These people are trying to work, not pose for your videos." He froze, phone still in hand. His face flushed bright red, and for a second, I thought he was going to snap back. But instead, he just walked out. Later that day, Lisa called me into her office. She tried to play it cool, but I could see the fury in her eyes. "Can you try to be more collaborative?" she asked. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at her. Then I leaned in, lowered my voice. "I'm not here to collaborate with people who are sinking the company. I'm here to clean up the mess you made when you replaced real work with smoke and mirrors. She sat back in her chair, arms crossed, lips tight. That's when it hit me. Lisa wasn't going to let me stay. No matter how much I fixed, no matter how much I saved, she was already looking for a way to push me back out the door once the worst was over. And I wasn't about to let that happen. That's when I made the decision. I called a lawyer friend. Told him everything. How I'd been pushed out without cause, how they replaced me with someone completely unqualified, how Lisa kept undermining the fixes I was putting in place. I had documentation, emails, spreadsheets, notes, everything. And the best part? The board didn't know half of what Lisa and Brandon had been up to. Like the fact that Brandon had signed off on a 6-figure marketing campaign without proper approval. Just to boost his own TikTok brand. Or that Lisa had quietly shifted funds from the logistics budget to cover her own pet projects, team retreats, branding consultants, crap like that. I started feeding information to a few key board members, quietly, piece by piece. And I watched as the cracks started to show. One morning, during a board meeting, Mr. Carter, who'd always been quiet, suddenly spoke up. I'd like to review the financials from the last 2 quarters. Especially the discretionary spending. We've had some concerning reports. Lisa's face went white. Brandon tried to look busy on his laptop, but I could see the sweat forming on his forehead. I sat there, calm, flipping through my binder, waiting. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And when the final domino fell, I wasn't just going to walk away this time. No. I was going to make sure they paid. The cracks I'd been watching for weeks? They finally split wide open. After that board meeting where Mr. Carter asked for the financials, I could feel the panic building. Lisa tried to keep up appearances, but her smile was tight, her eyes darting around like a cornered animal. Brandon stopped coming to the warehouses altogether. Word got around that he was working remotely. But the truth? He was probably holed up somewhere, trying to delete old TikToks where he bragged about running the logistics game. But it was too late. The board started digging. They found everything: Brandon's unapproved spending, the contracts he signed with sketchy vendors that collapsed mid-shipment, and the 6-figure branding deal he funneled to his friend's social media agency. And Lisa? They found out she was siphoning off budget funds for those useless retreats, the culture consultant she brought in, even personal expenses disguised as team-building activities. And when they traced it all back, they realized I'd been raising red flags the whole time. Documenting everything, offering solutions, trying to fix it. That's when I played my last card. I sent an anonymous tip to a local business reporter at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. I sent them screenshots, emails, spreadsheets, and details on the entire mess. When the article dropped, it blew up fast. The headline? How a TikTok logistics guru and a culture-obsessed manager crashed a multi-million-dollar supply chain operation. The fallout was brutal. The board called an emergency meeting. Without Lisa or Brandon. Lisa was fired the next day. Brandon resigned in disgrace, trying to claim he was never really in charge. But the receipts said otherwise. Vendors pulled their contracts. Lawsuits started piling up from clients who lost millions because of delayed shipments and canceled orders. The company's stock tanked. And me? I wasn't there to clean up the rest of their mess. I took the documentation I'd been collecting. The proof that I was wrongfully terminated for not fitting the culture, and filed a wrongful termination and retaliation lawsuit. The board settled fast. They didn't want another headline. The payout? Let's just say it was enough to pay off my mortgage, my kids' college, and still leave me with a comfortable cushion. But I wasn't done. I started consulting for one of their biggest competitors. Ironically, the same company Lisa had tried to block us from partnering with years earlier. They hired me at double my old salary. I brought in the same vendor contacts, the same logistics strategies I'd built at my old company, except this time, I got full credit. Within a year, that competitor was eating up my old company's market share. Lisa? Last I heard, she was trying to pivot into life coaching on LinkedIn, posting cringy motivational quotes, and trying to sell some course about building a strong team culture. Brandon? He tried to go back to TikTok, but his videos were flooded with angry comments from people who'd read the article. He'd pop up occasionally with a half-assed apology, but it never stuck. And me? I sleep just fine. Because they thought they could throw me away, replace real work with buzzwords and followers. They thought I'd stay quiet. But I kept my head down, did the work, kept the receipts, and when the time was right, I buried them with their own failures. That's the thing about people like Lisa and Brandon. They're too busy chasing the next trend to see what's right in front of them, until it's too damn late. And by the time they realized what hit them, I was already gone.